And let's bow our heads. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of all our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. And as always, I dedicate that prayer to the memory of my father. There are several different ways to serve and receive communion. We customarily use intinction here at our church as the way that we do receive communion. Intinction, as we know, is the form of communion in which the communicant comes down the aisle, takes a piece of bread, dips it in the juice, and then prays and goes back to their pew. We do this as a reminder that Christ gave his body and blood for us as the greatest sacrifice any person has made for others. And as you have probably experienced, intinction is not the only way to receive communion. Now, most of us, I'm sure, at one time or another, have knelt at the rail to receive the bread and the cup in that fashion. And one of these days, I really would like to do that. Is to take you remember we take the little cube of bread, you remember that, and then we take the little cup of juice and we take communion in that fashion. And that's really how I remember taking communion as a boy. I can remember kneeling at the altar, and I can remember having my dad kind of pass along the railing first and handing us the little bread and having to take them whispering prayers to us. And then likewise, when he took the cup, the tray of cups, he would pass along the way and again whisper prayers to us as we receive the elements. However, that was not the most important part of the service when I was young. The most important part was the race to the sacristy after church was over with my friends and with my brothers to engorge ourselves with the leftover cubes of bread. This was very important, and we knew when it was coming. So we prepared ourselves to make sure that we could get back there before, the people who were doing it would put it away and then we wouldn't get a shot. Now, I can remember Dad kind of telling us about our lack of decorum in doing this little exercise after communion, but of course that fell mostly on dead ears. But he probably had a point in telling us just that. We probably didn't act in a way that was appropriate for such a solemn sacrament. We were young. We had an understanding about what the elements represented, but because of our immaturity and our lack of experience, we couldn't fully understand the broader context within which the elements are received. If you had said bread of life to me back then, there is no way I would have understood what you were trying to say to me. The same could be said, I think, for the Jews listening to Jesus in today's gospel lesson. Jesus declares that he is the bread of life that came down from heaven. Jesus goes on to say that whoever eats this bread will live forever. And, now listen, the bread that I will give for the life of the world is my flesh. Now, the people are looking at one another, I'm sure, in puzzlement and a little bit of disbelief. Did he say we have to eat his flesh? Did he say he's going to give his flesh for us? Did he say his flesh? Yeah, I can see them cringing, no doubt about it. But these folks probably had good reason to cringe. At least when I made the race to go back and eat the leftovers, I had some context of the sacrament, of what the sacrament meant. These folks back then had no context whatsoever. No context. As I grew older and my faith deepened, I came to better know how awesome this sacrament really is. I could read the scriptures. I could discuss them with those much more learned than me. And as I grew and as I prayed that God would help me understand the deeper meaning of what takes place when we eat the bread and drink the cup. The people back then had none of these opportunities. I don't think we can blame them for appearing to be short-sighted and unable to understand what Jesus was trying to tell them. You and I know what's coming. The Last Supper, Passion, Crucifixion, and the celebration of Easter. The people in the passage had no knowledge of any of these things. Yet, there's no way they could have fully understand at that time what Jesus was trying to tell them. Now, in some ways, I think these kind of similar issues remain today. For as many religions and denominations there are in Christianity, there are probably just as many interpretations as the meaning of the bread and the cup. Some believe in transubstantiation. Now, you know what that is. That is, when blessed, people believe that the bread and the cup actually become the body and the blood of Christ. Some drink wine, others don't. Some practice an open communion, as we do, others don't. Others feel that only ordained ministry, priests can serve the people. Others believe differently. So then, how do we examine this bread of life in consideration of all of these differences? Well, one way that we can do that is by taking the bread of life out of the context of the sacrament of Holy Communion. After all, we too often regard the bread of life only in that context when we really should be aware of Jesus as the bread of life every day. For what do we hunger that Jesus might be the answer to our prayers? How is Jesus living bread for us? Let me give you a few thoughts to consider. Jesus is bread for us in our search for meaning for our lives. Thomas Naylor, Magdalena Naylor, and William Wilbon suggest in their book, The Search for Meaning, that the search for meaning and significance is the most important psychological issue of our time. Jesus may offer living bread in converting us to the divine and giving us an understanding of purpose in life in loving and serving others in a way that helps establish God's reign in the here and now. God is present with us for guidance. Jesus is bread for us in our need for support in facing trials in our lives. The examples of this are as numerous as there are grains of sand on a beach. People have been able to overcome all kinds of obstacles because of the faith they have in God through Jesus. Now, one example of this you may remember is Bethany Hamilton. She was the teenage surfer, championship surfer, who lost her arm in a shark attack, but was able to come back in an incredible amount of time and begin again or restart her championship surfing. In her book, Soul Surfer, she describes how her faith in God grounded her and gave her the strength to persevere in her quest to overcome her physical challenges. But we need not go farther than this gathering of our own community of faith to discover those situations in which we have asked God to provide us the strength to overcome the obstacles in our lives. God present with us for strength. Jesus is bread for us in our moments of desperation. He is a lifeline. Some of us face these moments more frequently than others, but hanging on by a thread to our sanity is something that most of us has experienced at one time or another. Such moments may include depression, the inability to find a job, family struggles, health issues. The list is endless. But in all situations, God offers us guidance, comfort, and strength, as exemplified in his Son Jesus as the bread of life that came down from heaven. As we think about Jesus as living bread for us, consider all the people all around the world in many cultures and languages who begin and end every day on their knees, asking God for what they need. For many of us, we connect best with God through this image of Jesus Christ as the bread of life. In the midst of the ongoing struggles of life, we turn to God for guidance, for comfort, and for strength. Just for today. Every week, we repeat together the Lord's Prayer. Now, I don't know how many of you really do listen to those words. They get to be so rote that we really don't pay enough attention, I don't think, to what we're praying. I've read many things of interpretation, some of them tongue-in-cheek, some of them not. I've heard some say that the words go, "Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name," because we only call on God when we're in that desperate time and we yell out for him. Another favorite phrase of mine is, "And lead us not into temptation, because I know the way all by myself." Really something that I used to think about quite a lot in earlier days when really trying to overcome some of the struggles that I went through. But the most important phrase, I think, of the Lord's Prayer is, "Give us this day our daily bread." There is a lot going on in that one phrase. Give us this day our daily bread. Can't worry about yesterday. Tomorrow is yet to come. I will make the same request tomorrow. But for now, give us this day our daily bread. Our daily bread. I didn't ask for a surplus. I didn't ask for some to store away for some rainy day. I will make the request again tomorrow. Give us this day our daily bread. Bread. Not a new house, not a nicer car, not a bigger TV, but bread. Bread that sustains us. Bread that gives us what we need so that we can serve God and spread the word of his kingdom. And bread as sustenance, as Jesus describes as the bread of life, so that all of our days we can be filled with God's guidance, with God's strength, and with God's comfort, and God's steadfast love for all of us, this day and all days. Amen. Let's continue.